Lighting okay, guys? No.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
No, it looks good. Yeah.
You look beautiful, Cole. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast. We're joined today by Cole Bolton. Cole, what's going on?
Not much. Thank y'all so much for having me on tonight. Super excited.
Now, also joined here by none other than Salazzo himself. We're excited about this guest because he is the owner of K&C Cattle, which is a local ranch here in Austin. And we're going to pick his brain a little bit about some of the things he's up to on his ranch. So, I know Salazzo and we've met Cole in person. He's an amazing speaker and also just an amazing person. So ready to get this one going.
Well, y'all flattered me. Thank you so much for the compliments. It's a pleasure to be on y'all's show. I've been watching all of your activity, and man, y'all guys are really, really killing it. And y'all have been a great reflection for our company too, because right as we were really getting ready to ramp up our e-commerce, and I'll kind of go into our backstory here in a little bit, but as we've been building over the last couple of years, we really did a huge push about really in line with what y'all are doing. And it's been pretty cool watching us both grow at the same time.
Yeah, I would say that we both agree that building relationships like this is incredible. And you just don't know what the internet is going to bring for you. It's like, I think we started following each other's accounts on Twitter a few months ago. And then we were able to co-host that amazing Bitcoin and beef event. And I'm not kidding, man, the way that you spoke, like I was just very cognizant of the crowd. And you could tell that people were really leaning in, and it meant a lot to really connect with their local rancher. It meant a lot to Clemenza and I. So we're excited just to, learn more about your backstory. We know you're a multi-generational farmer. We know you're into some Bitcoin. And I think that we're going to be able to help teach a lot of people about the connectivity of their food and the connectivity to their local rancher too. So we're pumped.
Yeah, Cole,
Yeah.
Maybe to kick it off, could you give us a little bit of the backstory around the start of K&C Cattle and sort of your interests? I know, as Salazzo said, you're a multi-generational farmer, so would love to get that story as well.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like a chameleon. I try to blend in all environments. And I grew up in a ranch in East Texas. My family, for as long as I can remember, have been running cattle. And, listening to y'all's stories, kind of similar to me in this aspect. I grew up on the commercial side of the industry. So what I did is I had a cow-calf operation. I took my calves. I purchased calves from other ranches and auction barns, put them together, got them healthy. And then I was turning around and I would sell them to the feed yards. Or I could also be a cattle feeder. And I love the business, but folks, as a young person these days, the capital to get into this industry is so intensive. And aside from the capital, you're doing it for hardly any money. And it's so frustrating. So I moved to Austin 7 years ago. I met my wonderful bride. I was living in East Texas. Coincidentally, with Bitcoin cattle, I run banks for a living. And I moved to Austin to be a banker. And moving to the city was culture shock for me. I've lived in Lubbock. I lived in South Texas, East Texas. Austin was different. And so I told her, I said, the only way I'm going to find balance, I'm going to get back into running cattle here. And so we started with our first group of about 75 head. And right before COVID hit, I was at the largest capacity I've ever been. I had almost 1,500 head of cattle. I was still playing in the commercial game. And then I took the mercy of the beating of the corporate packer. Mm-hmm. I watched, put capital in perspective. These are simple numbers. I had $750,000 in borrowed capital tied into all these cattle with the hopes that they're going to make $150 a head. And that's 4 months worth of work for each one. So you had to have so much volume to make the earnings worthwhile. Mm. And it's still a risk. You have weather, you have grass, you have, animal gets sick and unfortunately, occasionally, they die of pneumonia or what have you. And I took a beating. Fortunately, I bought hedges and margin calls. So I helped myself not lose as much, but the timing lined up perfect. And I had already been thinking, I'm really sick of doing this and working my butt off for nothing. I love agriculture. I'm passionate. I love the cattle industry. This is what I want to do. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing how you can't make money. I'm going to figure out a way so that I can help other ranchers say, you know what, there is a way we can make this work. And Austin's one of the hardest places. Our land costs within a 90-mile radius are so daggum expensive.
It's crazy.
It doesn't make sense. So I treat the land like a real estate investment, keep it as a separate business entity. And I bought some purebred Angus cattle. I got the best genetics I could with a partner of mine. I'll talk on our kill plant here, our processing plant here in a little bit. So he helped me invest in these genetics. I was helping as a banker, a farmer friend, give some financial advice who was doing the farm to table movement. And he was explaining to me how these organic vegetables made this. And then he started telling me about the health protocols. And it kind of intrigued me because I'd always been masked, to a different environment of agriculture, of raising cattle. And I really dug in and did a lot of research. And I woke up and I'm like, holy crap, we've been doing this wrong for a long time. There's a way we can provide healthy beef to folks without all these implants. So, and without pumping them, putting all these antibiotics in. And most importantly, whether it's a conscious, wholehearted decision that you want to stay completely regenerative for the environment, or you can look at it from a business perspective. How do I make each acre generate the most profit? It all can stem back into regenerative. And so I can get both sides of the aisle. I can get folks that are really hardcore environmentalists, or I can have ranchers that don't care about having to necessarily be a go green thumb, but they actually really care about making their earnings pay for, or, make their earnings greater and make the land pay for itself. So you can actually blend both worlds, because that's the root of any discussion. We can all agree on or disagree on philosophies, but if we can come to one root conversation and build on that, then we can attack all the other issues that we may agree or disagree on. So that's how I got started. And I consulted with this farmer. I saw the numbers and I'm like, man, this does make sense. Then I bought into the vision of what regenerative agriculture can do for the health of people. No different than y'all's story. Mm-hmm. And I started selling beef to friends and family. And I was using local processors. I was juggling at one time almost 3 of them. Just as we started to grow, it was 1 head a month. Then it was 2. And then fortunately now, we're going to harvest almost 75 to 100 head a month. Wow. We've grown exponentially. Austin has been a great place for that. People are more health conscious. People understand that, hey, we're tired of paying for medications and high insurance. Why don't we invest in our food first? And restaurants have been very supportive of it. And so with that, I've been able to culminate and work with all these local processors, local distributors. And I'm like, no different than I was tired of the corporate packers taking our money. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to go out and do my own distribution. Man, it's been a learning curve. It has kicked my butt at times, but, we're servicing restaurants. We do e-commerce. We go to a few farmers markets. We're doing events. I got to be on a podcast with y'all fine gentlemen. And so we're really, just trying to change the way that our industry historically has raised cattle, sold it to someone, and the profit split 5 different times. I'm trying to create an avenue so other producers can say, you know what, let's band together, have one consistent quality product we can put a stamp behind and say it was raised, antibiotic, hormone-free, and let's make our land work for us more so than let's just throw a bunch of cows in a pasture and feed them hay and throw them grain. And man, it's been great. It's been stressful. I will not lie. It carries a lot of headaches, but it's a lifestyle choice for me. And I get the best of both worlds. My wife and I can drive downtown for a really cool dinner and some, different foods in Austin. And then I can drive 15 minutes and be secluded from the world if I like.
It's incredible. What's cool is it really seems like you're forward thinking in an industry that's pretty antiquated in its thinking. And I know your background is you're educated at Texas A&M and
Tech. Oh man.
Oh,
I will throw tortillas at you.
Did you say tech? Oh shoot.
I went to Tech. Guns up, baby.
Okay. We'll edit that out.
Yeah.
So you're educated at Tech. What was or what is the feedback from people who you were, either learning alongside in this more conventional way of thinking as you're kind of taking these different steps into a more regenerative approach?
Well, I can tell you it wasn't real welcomed at first. Still isn't in a lot of circles.
Really?
Yeah, because it's not how we were raised. It's not this, generations of doing things this way. Change is hard for anyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what industry you're in. None of us want change. Isn't fun. It's different. It's not the norm. But what I, in my opinion, I think COVID brought the perfect storm. Because for the first time we saw people my age, we watched our parents go to work for companies for 30 years. And then we started seeing a generation that, got laid off from that company when they hit 60 or 61 and they didn't honor a retirement program. But for some reason, we kind of ignored it. Then COVID hit, and all of a sudden we're seeing these corporate entities that control, like Monsanto and Cargill and all these big companies that control our pesticide, they control our fertilizer. Coincidentally, they control the processing facilities, and inevitably they control your feed source, your feed yards. They control all these aspects, and they're the ones that are going to tell us what we can and can't make. They're the ones that are saying we have a supply chain shortage. No, we didn't. We had plenty of cattle. They're the ones that were pushing a whole different agenda, and because of that, now I'm finally seeing some of my classmates or folks I studied with or worked with. They're like, you're kind of onto something. We're sick and tired of that crap too. And if it means change, hell, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've watched that slowly start to shift to where more and more of them are being open-minded to doing something different.
Could you maybe unpack kind of where the industry is today because if you read headlines, there's a few out there that say food shortages and this and that. Is that what's being talked about behind closed doors amongst ranchers and farmers?
Yes. So this is what happened. Through the pandemic, we had a lot of mama cows that, our prices were going to crap. And they were holding cattle in the industry and got them so daggum big that when these plants started opening back up and allowing workers to come back to work, we had a huge glut of meat hit the market. But what's coincidental is we didn't see the price breaks as consumers. If you went to the grocery store, you saw record highs. Producers saw record lows. We were getting our butts kicked. So the market got flooded with inventory. Well, at the same time, you're also seeing a drought on the West Coast. You're seeing Texas, even though we've had some rains here in the last few weeks, a lot of parts of the state are still burning up. The Midwest is not having a great year either. And South America has been, if I understand correctly, they're having issues. The majority of our fertilizer and corn is being bought by China. Our fertilizer is coming out of Ukraine. So you have this perfect storm of all this stuff hitting. Well, because we killed so many, and because we took a lot of them older cows and got rid of them, because we're in a drought, what do? You sell because you can't afford to feed them. Now we've seen our replacement numbers have declined. The USDA, I believe, says it's 10%. So yeah, as farmers, we're a little bit, ranchers, we're optimistic. We do think that there is going to be some slight shortage of cattle, But quite frankly, if we were consuming it just in the United States, we don't have a shortage. We have plenty. But it's because of our exports and the way our controls are put in place that, yeah, there could be some supply. You're going to start more than likely seeing your middle meats, your ground beef, your skirt steak, flank steak, that kind of stuff at the grocery store will likely start rising. You may not see as huge of an increase on the steak side. They're probably going to kind of plateau and stay fairly level. According to the information that I've been reading. Who's to say that will actually be the case? But the shortage isn't because we're not killing them. It's because it's going other places. We have plenty of beef in the United States to feed our folks.
Cole, does that tie back into what you were saying before when you were talking about how the local rancher is really at the mercy of the corporate packer? Because I feel like there's a lot that goes into that statement. And I think a lot of people that are listening might not necessarily understand the way that these four packers control the way the local rancher operates. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So four packers own 90% of, I believe that statistic is correct. 90% of the industry of your meats. So in some form or fashion through their corporations or their subsidy corporations, they control the meat supply. So this is how it works. Cole Bolton owns 10 cows. My 10 cows have 10 calves. The normal rancher will take that calf to 500 or 600 pounds, take it to the local auction barn. Then at the auction barn, someone like me will, what I used to do, I would buy them, group those cattle together, maybe grow them for 3 to 5 months on wheat or oats, or depending on the time of year what the crop is, right? Then I sell that animal, or I feed that animal in a feed yard back then, up to 1,350, 1,400 pounds, depending. Steers we grow them longer. Heifers, we grow them we stop them at a lighter weight. So then, now this calf is good and fat. He's ready to harvest. That feed yard then calls JBS or Cargill or Tyson and says, hey, I have 60 head. They don't know who they're buying it from, of these type of cattle. What will you give us? Well, cattle are traded on a commodity index board, no different than stocks. So it's not a true supply and demand figure. It's whatever the day traders are sitting there trading paper for. So not only do I have to be a rancher and raise the animal, I got to understand commodity indexes. I got to understand margin calls to protect myself. Because if the day I go to sell, they say, that cow's worth $1.30 a pound. Right now, it's costing people about $1.30 to put that pound of weight on them in a traditional feed yard. So what's happening at the end of the day, the rancher is not netting hardly any money. And the packer, JBS, Cargill, Tyson, they're making anywhere from $800 to $1,100 for that animal, while your producer is not making anything after he figures all the costs and feed just to get them to weight to sell.
Is there a reason? So concentration in the industry obviously happens over time. The consolidation, I'm sure, took decades to get to that point where it's four big packers who have that level of control. Is that because there's regulations that are just overly burdensome that are in place in terms of how the process needs to take place? Or like, is there not a particular reason? Like, maybe I'm just naive to all the facts, but it seems like there should be a space for like smaller processors, no?
All right. So here's the deal. Yes, there is a space for smaller processors, but in all fairness, if you call me tomorrow and say, Cole, I want a half a side of beef, I'm going to give it to you at the best price that I can. But I can tell you right off the bat, whether it's me or any other producer, right here in Austin, there's about 4 processors we can all use within a 90-mile radius. Their fee to harvest that animal is going to be somewhere like, if we do it off of hanging weight. So when you harvest an animal after you dehydrate them, that weight is called your hanging weight. Most of my steers are going to hang in that 800, 850, 900 pound range. Some other people may have them at 600 pounds. We're charged anywhere from $1 to, I've heard, up to $1.50 per pound just to process. So simple math, 800 pound animal times, we'll go for right in the middle, call it $1.15 to process that animal. I got to pay the processor $920. These corporate packers that are killing 10,000 head a day can do it for 35, 40 cents. So how now do I go compete with, one of the complaints I get is, man, I go to the farmers markets, but gosh, the product is just so expensive. That's a whole nother argument for investing in your health. But what I'm trying to get other producers to do, if you can figure out how to make your earnings better on your land per acre, now we don't have to price near as high on the beef, and hopefully hold our margin. But what a lot of folks don't realize, when we're putting that much cost in processing, we're still not making all that much money. So I finally had enough of that. I have a great partner, and now I'm building a local regional processing plant that's big enough we can harvest volume, so that hopefully we can keep control that cost, so more and more people can raise their animals, bring them to us, get it cost effective, and be able to go to market with a product to where they can compete. We're not going to compete with HEB and Walmart. Totally different type of animal, but we shouldn't be too dang far off. And that's what we're trying to get for.
It's incredible. And the industry really does need people like you that are willing to put your money where your mouth is and step up. So I know we personally respect you tremendously for that. I know something we wanted to ask you, Cole, and this is probably a loaded question, but to the average consumer that's listening to this podcast that maybe has traditionally bought their meat or beef from a supermarket, and they're thinking about building relationships with their local rancher and sourcing from a rancher, what are the main differences in buying beef directly from you, KNC, or another rancher versus the supermarket?
Great question. I get asked this one all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, it is loaded. There's a lot of pieces to it.
Love it.
First off, you want to know the universal question: is it grass-fed? Is it grain-finished? How is the animal raised? That's real important. So for KNC, we raise our cattle on pastures their entire life. The last 90 days, we supplement with a non-GMO grain that I use. I work with local company breweries that are getting rid of spent brewer's grain. We add that into their diet. We put alfalfa. We try to drive home that marbling and use a very resourceful, useful way of byproduct, such as distiller grain, cottonseed hulls, to really drive home our protein, right? So that's important, because what a lot of folks don't understand is, I'm not going to go into the whole grass-fed side of things, because I support both. But a lot of folks say, oh, I just want grass-fed. Well, there's two different types of grass-fed. There's grass-fed where it's in someone's pasture, but what also certifies as grass-fed, they can use almost the exact same ration in which I do and put a grass-fed label right on it, because it's a forage base. Most people don't realize that. That's one key factor. Regardless of it, you want to know the biggest difference. Our beef is aged. So local ranches can take it to a local processor and let their beef hang for 10, 14, 21 days. Makes a huge difference in the taste profile. The meat's going to be more tender than you're used to. It's going to have a more rich flavor. Sometimes if you take that true pasture raised grass-fed beef, it may taste a little gamier. Sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on what kind of grasses they're being fed, right? At the end of the day, the profile of the texture is different. It's going to be richer. Most people that have bought from us, or the feedback that I get, is I never want to buy grocery store beef again. It doesn't have that stink that you smell in a lot of grocery store meat. It doesn't have the metallic taste. And most importantly, when y'all seen our ribeyes, y'all, and I know y'all cooked some of our stuff, kind of have that wow factor. You get that big, nice fat cat, things that you can't necessarily get because we spend the time and attention to detail on our processing side. Whereas the meat market, what they do, they harvest that animal at one of the big corporate packers. In 2 to 3 days, it's shipped right out the door in a primal setting. So they get a whole roast of ribeyes. They slice it up and you go eat it. Well, then you watch your steak shrinks, and then it tastes different. That's why when you buy meat from local guys, you usually don't have a whole lot of water weight loss, and you're not going to have a lot of shrinkage. Aging makes a huge difference in beef. And I will stand behind this. I think the omega-3s are higher when you buy local. The data shows that that is the truth. More than anything, though, I could taste test half your viewers. And I would guarantee this. I could take a ribeye that I know has been implanted, which is pretty much everything at the grocery store. I could take one, it doesn't matter if it's certified Angus beef, and you put them against the profile of something like ours or several other ranchers, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to take the local ranch beef. It just is different. It's richer. It tastes better. The fat tastes better because it's natural fat. The whole profile of the meat is different.
And just that level of customization too, where it's like, if I'm buying my meat from you and then Cole and Brett have a relationship, you know exactly how I like my steaks. You can, if I like my ribeyes 2 inches thick, you can cut it particularly that way. And then you can also tell me who the cow's parents are. I can literally go to the facility, see how they're raised out in the field. It's totally different. It's a different type of autonomy of the food you're putting over your body, where I've had this before where I've gone to like a Whole Foods and I've looked at a label and I've been like, is this thing grass-fed? Is it grass-fed, grass-finished? There's no way to really verify. Whereas like if we have a relationship, you're telling me, and you're probably showing me the cows too. So you can't even compare the two, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't mean it in a negative light to the to the cattle ranching industry. It's just, I think more producers, I've watched performance data. I study this with cattle that aren't implanted. The reason implants got started is because we were needing to get more cattle for our food supply, bigger, faster. But I'm watching performance data on cattle, i.e. mine, that are on a non-GMO grain and seeing how much they gain per day. I'm watching to see what that cost for that gain is. And they're doing just as good as these cattle that are implanted. And you know, and part of that's regional. You know, Central Texas is hot. Raising purebred Angus just like we do, it's a challenge. You got to keep water. You've got to keep a ton of shade. They're extremely lazy. You've got to make things very accessible to them so they don't have to walk too far in the summer. In the winter, it's a lot easier to grow cattle. But I think our industry as a whole is starting to realize that, because now I'm even seeing feed yards that are doing NHTC, which means cattle that have never received hormones. We're seeing our industry start to pay premiums for antibiotic free. All of a sudden, they're waking up. And even the big packers are realizing that the movement's there.
Is that more consumer driven, do you think?
Yes,
Gotcha.
it is.
And when you said implanted, I think is the terminology you were using. Can you just explain that for our viewers? Like what does that actually mean?
Yeah, sorry, that's
the
cowboy term. So when you were given, if we were trying to give an animal an implant, which is a hormone, it's an anabolic hormone. You slide a needle right into the ear, and we'll inject them with however many cc's of that antibiotic. I said hormone, steroid, so that it helps their body growth, their structure. They perform higher, and grow faster. One of the hard topics that I've been addressing with some folks is use of antibiotics. The cattle industry got a bad rap a long time ago because they were putting antibiotics in feed and doing pre-medicated feed on these smaller cattle. It's no different than humans. If I have an animal that's sick, they need to be treated. I'm not going to let them sit, suffer, and die. If you give one animal a shot when he's 6 months old, do I really think it carries over into the meat through the life of it? No, I really don't. I don't think it affects. Now, if you give one 90 days before slaughter? Well, yeah, the drug label even tells you that there is carryover. But when we certify no antibiotics, if I have an animal that gets sick, they don't go in my meat program. But if that conversation gets to where consumers feel the same level of comfort, knowing that, hey, we're not pumping them full of antibiotics. We treated a sick animal. 6 months later, he's just fine on the program. Then we might switch. But for now, we are still saying both antibiotic and hormone free. My biggest hot button is antibiotics. I think it's an issue.
That's how we get you upset, was we start talking about antibiotics.
Nah, you won't hurt my feelings. I promise. I promise.
So I guess one of my questions on that topic is, in terms of breeding, when you inject the steroids in cows, and look through their lineage, are you able to, is there like a discount premium for a cow that, like their family line hasn't been injected with steroids ever, or is that just not a thing?
No, so where they're giving them the steroids is for cattle that are going into meat. So for them, and what I mean by that, when you're driving down the road and you see a cow in a pasture, usually a mama cow, she's never going to get a steroid injection. I'm not saying never, but it's not really an industry standard that you do that, or that you do it necessarily with bulls. You let them reproduce. It's their offspring that get it, that are going into the food supply. You're giving them that to grow faster and get bigger quicker. And so no, but there is a premium on the offspring as you're taking them to market by not having it. The industry is paying a premium by keeping that out.
Got it.
So how do you offset that? It's through genetics. You invest in the genetics that, have high marbling, have a good sized ribeye. We can sonar scan our beef when they're yearlings, when we're given their ear tags, and we can actually get a pretty good shot real quick of how their ribeye is going to perform. And by taking those same genetics with cattle that are going to perform at a high rate, why in the world do we need the steroids? That's what genetics are for. I grew up kind of closed-minded. Buy a cheap bull, get a decent cow, make sure they're black, because the industry, the CAB, the certified Angus beef, says that animal has to be 51% black. Mm-hmm. That's what certifies.
Interesting.
I'm going to tell you right now, there is a huge portion of black cattle that are not Angus. They can be limousine. They can be a ton of other breeds. But you get a black cow, you put them on a black bull, they're going to make a black baby that's going to be 51% black now, certified Angus beef, right? Kind of screwed up. So, but it was a great marketing ploy, and I commend the Angus Association for doing it. However, I invested as good as I could in getting the top line bulls and having really, really good cows. They produce the offspring that are performing at a high level. So as you shift that into regenerative agriculture, Angus are hard with regenerative, because you take other breeds that are hardier, like Corrientes, or even a Texas Longhorn. They're great because they'll eat any daggum thing you put in front of them. They'll eat weeds. They'll eat the grasses that are tougher or stronger, but it all is in the profile of what kind of meat you're trying to raise. I don't really just want that. My customers want more of a marbled beef. I want to provide it. If they want a more lean beef, then we would do Corriente or Longhorn or something along those lines. And so, down here, we even keep a little bit of Brahman influence in our herd at times. Some of our cows will be 3/4 Angus, but might have a quarter of Brahman at times. And then we breed them back on pure blood Angus. And then that next offspring generation, we breed on pure blood, because Brahmins are heat tolerant. And that's real important when we're going to have 90 days of 105 degrees this summer. So
yeah,
breeding is a huge part of that program.
Cole, I was curious. Do you see a trend amongst other processors to continue to become more hyperlocal, and ranchers choosing to try and take their business to the hyperlocal processing facilities?
Yes. We are seeing it, and I'm super stoked because I'm watching more. I mean, yeah, it brings more competition to the market, but competition's good. And what I see is the more people that are cognizant of good product, they're going to keep buying. And so that's what I'm building this plant for. I want more and more producers to be able to bring their product, and I even want to be able to help, if we can, to market it for them, because that's the hardest thing, is market access. You know, we can all drive to farmers markets, but at the end of the day, I'll shoot you straight. Looking from a business standpoint, the ROI at a farmer's market's not really that good. Mm-hmm. By the time you figure time, labor, you don't make hardly any money. Mm-hmm. And that's where e-commerce comes into play. And that's where I really shifted our model and pushed heavily with e-commerce. And then word of mouth catches wind, and no different than y'all's platform. And then holy crap, you look up, you got a ton of people really supporting it because they believe in it. I want to help other ranchers do that. A lot of them are jumping on board. They just don't know where to start.
Is that so? Not knowing where to start, is that because they're like, they just don't know how to incorporate the technology into their systems?
It's a lot of it. They don't understand marketing. They, ranchers are really good with technology, even though they'll tell you they're not. Our tractors run on GPS. I mean, we know how to use a lot of the basics and do mechanics. I'm not one of them. I was not gifted with mechanics, but I understand technology now. But they'll start with friends and family and sell a half a steel. The problem is with a lot of them is they've never fabricated. So like when we were at that event, y'all got to see some of the cool cuts we offered that you don't see in the grocery stores, like hanger steaks, picanha, terrace major. Those ranchers don't know how to offer that to customers because they're not in the business of cutting meat, right? So what I'm thinking and I'm trying to do is I want to go to ranchers and say, okay, you focus on a genetic profile that matches, either our program or another program that we're going to start. We follow a set rule of shot protocols. We follow a set rule of no antibiotics, no hormones. We follow a set feeding program. And then we can set up a buyback program where we buy their calf crop, because if they don't feel like they have the ability to market it, I hope that I can help just bring it into ours and we can just expand and grow together. So in essence, I'm trying to help kind of create a co-op, but without having, I'm not trying to be politically incorrect here, that many chiefs and, no Indians. You can only have a few people running it or it's going to be chaos.
Right.
But we want to provide an outlet so that they get paid a premium too. And we'll just help them with the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of those cuts, I mean, I remember at the event where we met each other, you gave me that Denver cut. I bought a couple of those Denver cuts off you. And I think you had said it cooks just like a New York strip and it's like $8 a pound. And the flavor was so freaking good. It's got like this ruby red color to it. It's so rich. It's got that great taste. And I'm like, you can't even get this at the grocery store if you want to, because most people don't even know that this is a prize cut. It's like this underrated MVP cut.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Same way with chuck eyes and even flat iron steaks. A lot of folks don't realize it comes out of chuck. So either at the grocery store, the best offering is you're usually going to get ground chuck, which won't waste a great cut on turning it to trim, or you're going to buy a chuck roast. And nothing against a good old-fashioned chuck roast, but that's the beauty of using local. We can take it to another level. And specifically with us, I mean, I study meat. And so I know ways in other cuts, 52% of a carcass usually turns to trim. I take it personal that it's my job to help lower that percentage as much as we can and tell you all the different cuts you can try. The Californians moving to Texas have really made tri-tip a hot thing. I'm as much of a lover of picanha as I am of tri-tip. Very similar profile. Both come out of sirloin, and they both taste freaking awesome if done right. So that's some of the cool stuff we get to do.
It's cool that there's this educational component to it on a lot of different fronts, like from the consumer facing side, how to cook these things, which cuts to buy, But then also on the other side, which I think you're doing a really great job of, which is like, there's this whole industry that's kind of changing and evolving in real time. And a lot of it is hitting on these issues that are getting headlines now, like environmental and, economic, all these different pieces. And I think that what I've really enjoyed about getting closer to KNC is like, you guys kind of are able to touch on all these things, which has been amazing.
It helped me a lot with my dad. He's a hardcore closed-minded old rancher. He's going to do it the same way he's done forever. And he wanted to argue with me one day that he buys steaks from Sam's. Okay. And so I'm like, all right, I'm fixing to teach you a lesson. So I grilled 2 steaks. I made sure I brought a boneless ribeye because that's all he wanted to eat. So I could put it against a Sam's boneless ribeye because they don't cut freaking bone ends, right? They don't cut them. All right, put them side by side. Obviously, I knew I was going to win, and we did. My point was, I told my dad, he's like, doing that farm table crap, you ain't going to make any money. It's going to be too hard. And he's not wrong. It is hard. And there is an expensive learning curve. And I'll be damned, excuse my language, but my parents are now selling about 5 to 6 carcasses a month in East Texas, and he followed the same thing. And now he's jumped on the program, and we're not implanting, we're not giving antibiotics. So I have someone that completely thought this is ridiculous. Why would I waste my time? And he's doing the exact same thing. And he got on fire because he saw consumers are like, crap, this tastes so much better. And the consumer profile where they're at, it's a lower economic area. I was even scared that it would be hard to really get a customer base because the foods weren't, it's a higher price point. And I thought people just would buy cheap food, and they're not. And now he saw it. Now he's a believer. And so if I can get someone like my dad that's been doing it this way for 40 years, all of a sudden to be cognizant of that, now his health feels better. He's not as sore as he used to be. He's eating more red meat. And I'm bringing in studies from doctors about cholesterol levels and what it can do for folks. I don't spend my time selling. It is one of the few enjoyments of life because I've sold my entire career. I just spend my days educating, whether it's educating about meat, educating about cattle, educating about health. That's what we spend our time doing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a soft spot in the market where it's you're this younger rancher, and I think it's this great point where you're a younger rancher who sees the whole field, and you're able to kind of play in all areas of it. So I'm actually curious. So you're talking about your dad and how you changed his philosophy. Are you seeing more younger people like Salazzo and I might be a good example, but any other people really like anchoring in and interested in joining on board in terms of what you're doing, or just interested in learning more about what it takes to ranch?
So much so that I'm actually working on another program where we, for some of these ranchers that don't want to get and go farm to table with us, they just want to raise cattle and not deal with any more headaches. They want to sell a calf at 500 pounds. So I'm working on designing a program to where folks like y'all, if y'all really believe in this, we can go buy these groups of cattle, put them in our program at the ranch. You get to be a part of the entire experience, and you can also have ownership.
Wow.
And so I've had so many people asking like, man, I want to be able to provide food for 15 family members. I got an avenue now. And it's not, you can actually be a part of the process with it. And I think people are really buying into that. So I'm trying to be able to provide an outlet for that, so that more and more folks can jump on board. And part of the fun thing with this too is I don't step away from my roots either. I still ride horseback. I have a great set of little dogs here, and we do stuff the old cowboy way of things. And honestly, our cattle are more docile because of it. So I try to bring some of those same philosophies we all grew up wanting to be, that that cool picturesque cowboy, and I want to use it if it's efficient. If I'm in a big hurry, I'm gonna jump on a daggone four-wheeler today. But you know, if time works and it's more efficient with this group of cattle, we're going to run a set of dogs, bend them, you know, let them bay them up, push them right up into the pens, get them worked in the safest, quickest manner. So yeah, I kind of blend it all together.
Mm. And speaking of blending it all together, Cole, have you been surprised just at the leverage and the connectivity of the internet and the amount of business and interest that that's brought people into KNC?
Holy smokes. So, you know, I've had Facebook for a long time, but I learned about Instagram and I learned about Twitter, and it was so slow at first. And part of it's because I didn't know about hashtags and what all acronyms to use. But what I found is as all that stuff started building, then it just accelerated. It's like one day the light switch came on. I'm like, crap, this does work. Google ads do work. And then it just really, really took off. So yeah, I was slow and hesitant at first, and I got frustrated a lot of times. It really sucks with Facebook and Instagram because when you're a producer, you can't sell meat. What I mean by that, so if you try to go to Facebook Marketplace, I have to play with my verbiage so that it doesn't show that I'm selling an animal or selling beef because it's all prohibited by Facebook. So you may see something on Marketplace of half cow sure tastes good, and it kind of looks awkward and you wonder if it's spam. It's because we're having to play with our words, otherwise it gets kicked out over and over and over. But I also found that if you throw money and pay them a little bit for ads, they're more prone to let your stuff go through Marketplace. So just had to play the system.
Yeah. Well, I think the good news is that, at least in our circle, there is a massive group of people that are migrating to Austin that are very intentional about where they want to source their food from. Sure. So I'm sure you're already seeing the effects of that. You're going to continue to see the effects of that. And we want to just keep promoting that messaging as much as possible. And I think the interesting thing for the three of us on this call is it's like Clemenza and I talk about this all the time. It's like you almost you have your own journey with nutrition, right? You're taught, beef, saturated fat, you should stay away from these things. Then you start eating more of it, you feel fantastic. And that's like layer number one. And then layer number two is like, all right, well, now let me be intentional about where I'm sourcing it, making sure that the animal's not stressed out, they're taken care of, they're not fed antibiotics. It's really interesting to see that progression. And it's something that the three of us have seen. And it's so cool for us to build relationships with someone like you and have a friendship now.
Yeah. My thing I would leave for your followers is I know it can get expensive trying to source and do as much of the stuff as you can local. Start somewhere. Start, whether it's with protein or it's with your vegetables. Get a good starting point and slowly build on it. And I think what you'll find in the end, numerically, Americans for the last 60 years, we spend less than 10% of our gross income on food. We've become glutton to sugars, starches, technology, spending our money on cool cars, on this and that, and not spending money on our health. What's 5%? What's making 15% of our income spent towards that and squeezing out maybe something over here that we didn't need. And then what we find in the long run, we feel better. So then your health costs go down. And it just has stuff y'all preach all the time. It just has that snowball effect. It's awesome.
You got to look at the whole picture. Your comments remind me of we had an interview earlier in the week with Dr. Philovadia, and he brought up the point that we talk about pretty regularly, which is you got to look at the lifetime value of that food cost. I mean, if it's going to be impairing your health long term, don't pay $1 for a taquito, some Doritos. Go invest that in your KNC steaks, right?
I hope so, but I'll tell y'all one scary thing to think of as you go to sleep tonight. Average age of the rancher in the United States is 68 years old. Wow. Young people aren't going back into this. And I'm trying, hoping, praying we can find an avenue, because it's either that or we're going to start eating fake meat. And that's a whole nother subject. But we've got to get young people on board. And we got to get young producers that want to jump back in this, because it's a lot of daggum work.
Yeah.
We sweat our butts off. We work our butts off. It's a lifestyle choice. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But we've got to get some folks back into this. Otherwise, we're going to be in a big problem.
Well, I think that's an amazing point to cut it for part one. I know we're definitely would love to have you back on for part two and dig into some of that beyond beef and animal protein propaganda that's being dispensed right now. But can't thank you enough for coming on. It's so cool for us to now have a relationship with you. And as we were saying before, we definitely think that there will be some type of KNC Meat Mafia collaboration, hopefully within the next few months. So we're excited for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for your time, Joe.
Cole, maybe before you pop off, just where can people connect with you online? What's the best way to get in touch with Cole?
Yeah, so you can check us out at kncattle.com. It's KAND as in dog, C cattle.com. Or you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all at KNC Cattle. See if I can, there we go. KNC.
Beautiful.
But yeah, follow us on all the social media platforms. We're going to be putting some pretty cool info out. And I think we're going to be doing some stuff with Meat Mafia too. So.
Oh yeah. And if you're local to Austin, it's a must to check these guys out. You guys are doing great things. So appreciate it, Cole. And we'll talk soon.
Hey, sounds great, gentlemen. Y'all have a great evening. Thank you, followers.